About 30 miles northeast of Kitale, you come to the police barrier which seals off the wild and primitive region of West Pokot from the rest of the world. Only if you have a special government permit can you pass the barrier and begin the long and dangerous descent into the Forbidden Valley.
I wish I got here as easily as that message did. Here we're in our tomb, right at the bottom of the Souk Valley, surrounded by 10,000-foot high mountains. There's no place in the valley level enough for an airplane to land, but occasionally a friendly pilot drops a message from the outside world amid scenes of great excitement like this. Up to as recently as 10 years ago, no white man had ever lived in the Souk Valley. But now there's a convent here, a church, a hospital, and boarding schools for boys and girls, all run by Irish missionaries. It's an outpost of Christianity and civilization in the midst of one of Africa's most remote and inaccessible tribes.
The Souk Valley, or West Pokot as it's officially called, is really a whole series of valleys that covers a vast tract of territory in northwest Kenya. It's the home of the Pokot tribe, who may number 50,000 or 80,000 or even 100,000. No one has ever succeeded in counting them. They wander freely through their rugged country in search of grazing for their cattle and goats, which are their only form of wealth. They usually travel in small family groups, and it's only on the rare occasion of a cattle auction that you see them gathered together in any kind of large numbers. The parish priest of West Pokot is Father Leo Staples, a Kiltegan father from County Wexford. When he first came here 10 years ago, he was the first white man who had ever lived in the valley. He sees more of his parishioners on auction day than he does during all the rest of the year. Today, they're here in their thousands. By tomorrow, they'll have melted back again into the mountain valleys with their families and herds. The auction is sponsored by the government in an effort to reduce the number of cattle in the area, since the traditional grazing grounds have been badly affected by drought and can no longer provide all the food that is needed. The Pokot people are not altogether enthusiastic about these auctions. They're not used to handling money, and they're not convinced that a few pieces of paper is a fair exchange for a good cow. Moreover, they don't fully trust the buyers from the highlands, men who belong to other tribes, men who speak other languages, who wear coats and shirts and trousers just like foreigners. Once the beast has been sold, the seller is paid in Kenya shilling. And now the Pokot comes up against the harsh realities of modern existence. The auction ring is cunningly designed so that on the way out, he must pass the tax inspector. And within 10 seconds of earning his first income, he finds himself paying his first income tax. He pays because he hasn't any choice, but he obviously feels that there's something unfair about the whole proceeding, even if he can't just put his finger on what it is at the moment. The mission at Ortoom is less than half a mile from the auction ground, and it's almost as busy in its own way. The boys and girls' schools have each more than 100 pupils on roll and are expanding all the time. Accommodation is a perpetual problem. The boys have only one tiny building which serves as classroom by day and dormitory by night. But they're firm believers in self-help, and at present they're building themselves a dormitory of mud and wattles. The work of treading the mud to the right consistency and then slapping it into place on the wattle framework is not merely useful, it's also highly enjoyable, and a good time is evidently had by all. Almost all these boys are Christians. They're usually only a short time at school before they start asking for baptism and are placed under instruction. Their parents raise no objection, and indeed are usually quite pleased, but they're very, very slow to accept Christianity themselves. The accommodation at the girls' school is on the whole rather better than the boys', and the girls themselves look very neat and well cared for in their trim uniforms of blue and white. The girls are very anxious to wear European clothes and lay aside the skins, beads and heavy earrings normally worn by Pokot women. Some of those who had their ears pierced in 5 places for the 5 traditional earrings have gone to the hospital and had the holes sewn up again. The headmistress of the girls' school is Sister Aloysia, and she's got big ambitions for the school in Souk Valley. Unlike the boys, the girls don't do any building themselves, but they're busy collecting stones to fill in the foundations for an extension to their school, and the different standards are locked in deadly rivalry to see which can mass the largest pile.
The girls are at their lunch now, sister, are they?
Yes, Father.
They have open-air meals.
Yes, we've little difficulty. Our dining hall is very small. So when the weather is fine, and as you know, on account of the drought, they've been able to sit out at a picnic every day this year.
That's true. Sister, why do you have boarding school here rather than day schools?
Well, you see, Father, the Pokot women do not like sending their children to school, as you have noticed, I'm sure, since you came. And a lot of the children in this school are from their different tribes. We have Bukusa and Kikuyu and Maasai.
So you're not really touching on the Pokot so much, are you not?
Well, we have a few, Father, and we're trying to encourage them, but it's very difficult.
What's the problem? Why don't they want them educated?
Well, I think it's just that they're still very backward, Father. The women don't want their little girls to come to school. Of course, they mind the goats. They have a lot of work like that to do at home, and they're not interested. They're really not interested in education. But we're hoping that through the boys' boarding school and the girls' boarding school, eventually we'll be able to build up the Christian family, because some of the girls, when they leave school, those that have come up to the top classes, they have actually, there are 1 or 2 now that have become 2nd and 3rd wives. They have no Catholic gentlemen to marry.
I know. Well, does that mean a complete breakaway from the church then?
Well, it doesn't, Father. A lot of them come back, the girls that go off like that. And they have.
I suppose it's hard enough for them, the first generation anyway.
It's very difficult, Father. They have even things that we don't know about at all, I suppose.
Yeah.
Those that keep good and do live the Christian life, they're really heroic. Yeah.
Sister, how satisfying do you find working here in Ortoom as a missionary?
Oh, this is marvellous, Father. It's just my idea now of what the missions were going to be.
Yes.
I think it's Ortoom is really, I have been in a few places in West Africa and here, and I think Ortoom is a real challenge.
Why? Because they're so
even though Father and the sisters are here for 10 years, Father, you can see that still there's an amount to be done for the church. You may look around and you may think there aren't many people. There are. Even the auction would show you there are thousands and thousands of people around. And there are so few of them have come into the church.
Well, does it depress you that so few have, in fact?
Missionaries don't get depressed, Father. If you're a soul of depression, you better take to the heels.
In the Souk Valley, death is never far away. Most Pokot babies die soon after birth, and those that survive rarely reach a ripe old age. The people have a great fear of death, and when one of the family dies, the others run away at once and leave the body to be eaten by wild beasts. Among the chief causes of death are TB, malaria, dysentery, and Kal-Azar, all of them complicated by malnutrition. It was to fight these diseases that the Holy Rosary Sisters from Killeshandra came to the valley in 1956, only a few months after Father Staples himself. At present there are 3 nuns in the little convent in Ortoom, and the superior is Mother Rosa, who also acts as matron of the hospital and chief mourner at all the funerals that take place here. The original hospital was a very modest affair indeed, but the nuns were busy all the time collecting funds for a fine, up-to-date building on which they'd set their hearts. Their new hospital meets most of their requirements, except that it's always overcrowded. But this at least is a welcome change from the early days when the people were afraid to go near the white man's house. When this man, Raymond, began to work for the sisters as a hospital orderly, he was expelled from his tribe for the terrible crime of touching dead bodies. But gradually patients drifted in and local girls joined the nursing staff, and the hospital is now a permanent part of the valley's scene. The sick now raise no objection to the preliminary bath and haircut. They put on the coloured nightshirt, drink the white man's medicine, and sleep in the white man's bed without any visible ill effects.
What about these patients out in the veranda here?
They're all TB patients, and we have to have them in the veranda because we've no ward for them.
Yes. Is it good for them to be out
No,
here?
it's not good for them. The sun here is very strong, and the sun is very bad for them. And then the cold at night, and wild animals can get in at night. We very much would like to have a ward for them. And they're really very sick patients, you know.
I know, they look only skin and bone.
Yes, they are.
Why don't you build a ward for them?
Well, we haven't any funds. We're trying to collect funds.
And do you get any government help for the hospital?
We get very little. The doctor gets a salary, sister doctor gets a salary. We use that for running the hospital. Yes. And the patients can pay very, very little fees.
How much
so
do they pay?
About 10 shillings. They pay 10 shillings when they come, and some of them are in about a year. Doesn't even buy the soap to wash them.
Yes. I suppose washing must be a very big problem here.
Oh, the washing is one of the biggest problems because the people are not, they're not used to wearing clothes. They wear skins and they dirty their clothes very much.
Yes.
Now, our water situation is very bad at the moment, and the men we get to do washing never washed a stitch in their life. So we have a lot of trouble like that. We would really love to have a washing machine, put in the things and get them washed clean.
How do you manage with these mud caps? Do they have to take off the mud caps when they come into hospital?
We cut that off. We try to get it off. In the beginning there was a lot of, they wouldn't let us do it, but now they're beginning to realise, they're beginning to learn a little bit of hygiene. I think we're teaching them that.
Yeah.
So,
who's this lady here?
That's Jem. She's an orphan. Kifungua. She's an orphan. She was brought into us. Her mother died at home, and she was brought into us. Akuna, Jem, Gwenda.
And she lives here in the.
She stays with us. Yes.
Well, are you going to have to pay for?
We have to support her and everything. So there's some people in Ireland have sent us some donations for the orphans.
The doctor, Sister de Paul, is the third and last member of the community. As well as working in the hospital, she makes regular medical safaris to the furthest ends of the valley in the hospital Land Rover. Father Staples leads the way in the other Land Rover because the road is a treacherous one and is often blocked by floods or landslides.
This is Lomut, 2.5 hours by road from Ortoom, and what a road. It's enough to make a mountain goat dizzy as it bends and twists its way over precipices and mountain ridges in a series of terrifying hairpin bends. There's no church or hospital here at Lomut as yet, but one day, please God, there will be. Until then, Sister Doctor and Father Staples must continue to make that bone-shattering half-day's journey to serve the people of Lomut.
Father Staples has many friends in Lumut, and they show their pleasure at seeing him by shaking hands in the Picot fashion. When he first came to the valley, he knew not one word of the local language, and there were no books to help him. But years of patient study have made him completely fluent, and he's even succeeded in translating the prayers of the Mass and the Sunday Gospels into Picot. The priest only manages to get to Lumut for Mass about once a month. There are many other parts of the valley which have Mass even less often, but Lumut is lucky because it has a small school and a teacher for its little Christian community. When Father Staples preaches, he's preaching not only to the few Christians, but to the many pagans as well. They listen attentively because they know and respect the missionaries, but they keep a polite distance away and obviously don't want to become involved just yet. On the other side of the clearing, the outdoor clinic is taking place.
Yes.
A small folding table has been set up in the shade of a large tree, and this is Sister Doctor's consulting room, where she examines a long succession of patients and writes out the appropriate prescription for each case. The prescriptions are brought over to the back of the hospital Land Rover, where the medical supplies are kept. Usually the nurses take charge of the dispensing, but today Sister Doctor has an unexpected assistant in the person of Sister Oliver, who has just arrived for a few days' holiday in the valley. Medicine, which has to be taken a number of times a day over a certain period, presents a problem for the Picot, as they believe in finishing off a bottle as soon as they get it home. For that reason, Sister Doctor prefers to prescribe medicines and treatments that can be administered on the spot.
May I disturb you, sister? Excuse me.
Yes, Father.
You're very busy today. Is it always as busy as this?
Yes, usually we have a big number here in Lumut, Father.
How many would you see in a day?
About 170, Father, I think. It will come to about that today, but we have over 200 some days.
Do you?
Yes.
It must be pretty tiring at the end of a day, having driven 2.5 hours journey or by road, if you can call it a road.
Well, you get used to it, Father, you certainly do. And as you see, with such big numbers, we don't have time to do complete examination. We just try to see quickly what is the matter and then write the treatment.
Well, it's rather hit and miss, is it then?
Well, to a large extent, you can see very quickly what is the matter with the patient. So many of them have eye infections. It is the commonest disease here in West Picot. And then we have the skin diseases like scabies and things which are very, very obvious and which we can see very, very quickly.
This greasing of the hair, does that cause the skin diseases? It doesn't look very hygienic anyway.
It is not hygienic, Father, but not necessarily causing skin disease. They can have lice and that sort of thing in the head, all right.
What about these mud packs that the men wear with the feathers in them? They must be a breeding ground for all sorts of creepy crawlies.
Oh, they are indeed. They have special holes, in fact, in those mud caps.
To let them out?
To let them out.
That sounds tremendous. Sister, what about the children? A lot of them seem to be bringing children along to you.
Yes, we have the most patients that we have any day, any place are children, because the mothers know very, very, very little on how to look after even a newborn child. You will find that very many mothers who come, they will say they've had 9 pregnancies and maybe 2 children are alive, and many of them die of pneumonia, of exposure in the first week of life. So we try always to advise the mothers to look at to keep the children covered. That is a very important thing, because even though we have warm weather today, it's cold at night time and they still have no clothes to wrap the children in.
I noticed them over at the Land Rover getting injections. They seem to be terrifically tough. You didn't see a flicker on their faces when the needle is stuck in.
Oh yes, they love injections, Father. If they don't get an injection, they feel, well, doctor hasn't given them any good medicine today. So with most of them, I give them an injection, either penicillin, which is going to help their infection, or if they haven't really got any very bad infection, well, then I give them a vitamin injection, which certainly will help them. But they must have the injection, otherwise, what's happening with them?
Sister, I won't disturb you. You have plenty to do. Thanks very much.
Father Staples has one more task to do before he leaves Lumut. A baby, which was born since his last visit here, is brought for baptism. And now, in the centre of the clearing, the young men are starting their limbering up exercises for the dance, which is to provide a memorable climax to a memorable day. Sunday morning in our tomb. Mass begins with the Asperge ceremony and the blessing of the church and congregation. Despite its venerable appearance, the church is less than 10 years old, and the congregation who fill it from wall to wall were all pagans 10 years ago. It's no small achievement for so short a period of time, and the fervour of the people leaves no doubt about their sincerity. Everything possible has been done to make them feel at home in church. They pray in their own language, and above all they sing in their own language, hymns and litanies set to their own Picot melodies and sung with wholehearted conviction. On any Sunday morning, the congregation in our tomb will include local Christians, boys and girls from the schools, nurses and patients from the hospital. It will also include a proportion of pagans drawn by the singing and by their own instinctive religious sense.
What sort of method do you use when you're preaching to the non-Christians? How do you try and win them over?
Well, normally, when I'm preaching, I nearly always take for granted there aren't any Christians there. That's my idea. Because it's very, if you be thinking in terms of Christian and non-Christians, it's very hard to know what team to take.
So quite a number of the pagans actually come to Mass, do they?
Oh, quite a big number, yes. Quite a big number. And when I'm preaching them, I nearly always, I go in for parables in a very big way. Something that they will understand, like fires burning in their gardens, their goats, grass, and planting the seed, and mothers feeding their baby, like... For instance, we have found great difficulty in getting across to them that we are here for their good. And I very often use the illustration of a mother feeding her baby with both hands, food in both hands. And the baby takes the food from both hands, and the child knows it's all good. In the same way, I say, we have come here. We have food in both hands, if you like. We have medicine for their bodies and medicine for their souls. And I compare the medicine for in the hospital to the food that the mother has in his right hand. In other words, the church is their mother, come to feed them. And the medicine in the hospital is what the mother has in his right hand. And I say, you have accepted that. You are glad to get it. And you have been very pleased that we have brought it to you. And therefore I said, be like a child, I said, and accept what's in the left hand also, what's in the church. I don't mind to cast a slur on putting the church in the left hand, no. But it's just an illustration that they should accept and trust their mother, if you like.
Well, have you found this an effective line?
Well, it's hard. I mean, they always say, yes, we see it. But it's to judge by results, it's hard to know whether you're getting it. But at the same time, I can't see that any other method would work. Not that I know of anyway. We go from the seen to the unseen, if you like.
I know. Do you ever get depressed that you haven't had bigger numbers here come into the church?
Well, it's a thing that one has to be guarding against all the time. It's a very strong temptation, but it's like any other temptation. You have to fight against it.
Do you ever wonder if perhaps you wouldn't be better off if you were working in one of the big towns where there are big numbers of people needing to be catered for?
I don't think so, no. Well, I think the parable in the Gospel about Apollo and Paul watering and planting, it's a very great source of comfort to us. And as well as that, our Lord said the poor must have the Gospel preached to them. And if everybody goes to town, well then our Lord's wish won't be fulfilled. And personally, I don't have any desire to go to town at all.
Well, do you think that there's going to be a real breakthrough here? Are you confident about this in the future?
It's really hard to know, but and at the same time I'm not worried about it. If things come slowly, I'm not worried personally anyway. And at the same time, there's always the possibility that there will be a breakthrough. There has been a breakthrough in other places which were difficult in the beginning, and suddenly things began to liven up. We hope for that, but we're not worried about it. As long as we do our duty and preach them and do our best, well, personally anyway, I'm quite satisfied.
No one knows for how many hundreds of years the Picot have lived in their forbidden valley, cut off from the rest of the world by barriers made by nature and by man. But their long centuries of isolation are now ended, and their old way of life is doomed. What will their new life be like? Will they accept the values of Western materialism and adopt a new paganism in place of the old? Or will the little seed planted in our tomb take root and spread throughout the valley? The missionaries have worked hard and long and selflessly. The result of their labours lies in the future and in the hands of God.